A routine North Sea transit turned into a fireball, a death, and a criminal case shaking global maritime safety. A violent North Sea ship collision sparked explosions, environmental fears, and a criminal investigation now heading toward a high-profile trial. At 9:47 GMT on March 10, 2025, the North Sea was calm, gray, and deceptively ordinary. 14 nautical miles off Spurn Head, near England's East Yorkshire coast, commercial shipping moved through one of Europe's busiest maritime corridors. Nothing about the morning suggested catastrophe. Then steel met steel. The Portuguese-flagged container ship MV Solong was underway at cruising speed, following a route it had taken many times before. Ahead of it, stationary but not silent, the U.S.-flagged aviation fuel tanker MV Stena Immaculate sat at anchor, waiting clearance to enter port. One ship was moving, one was not. That distinction would soon define everything. Without warning, the Solong struck the port side of the tanker. The impact triggered immediate explosions. Flames erupted across the waterline. Within seconds, a massive fireball rose above the sea, visible from miles away. Thick black smoke punched upward, staining the sky. This was not just another shipping accident. The Stena Immaculate was carrying fuel for the United States Air Force. The collision happened in international waters, near a major British coastline. And within minutes, it became clear that lives were at risk, fuel was leaking, and a routine transit had turned into a geopolitical and criminal flashpoint. The collision itself was violent, precise, and unforgiving. Data later showed the Solong was moving at approximately 16.4 knots when it struck the tanker's port side, tearing into the rear half of its hull. Thermal imagery, captured from nearby vessels, would later show the Solong approaching the anchored tanker in a straight, uninterrupted line. There was no sudden evasive maneuver, no visible attempt to slow. Then, contact me. Crew members reported multiple explosions in rapid succession. The ignition of jet fuel created an immediate inferno, engulfing both vessels in flames. From above, the fire appeared almost unreal, a bright, expanding bloom against dark water, consuming steel as if it were paper. For several minutes, the two ships remained physically entangled with each other, burning, drifting, locked together by twisted metal and momentum. When they finally separated, the Solong began to drift, damaged and still aflame, while the tanker remained wounded but afloat. Critically, only one of the Stena Immaculate's 16 cargo tanks was breached. That single detail mattered enormously. The tanker's compartmentalized design prevented a chain reaction that could have released its entire fuel load. What could have become an uncontrollable environmental disaster was instead narrowly contained, not by luck, but by engineering decisions made years earlier. Inside both vessels, order collapsed into urgency. Sirens cut through smoke-filled corridors. Fire alarms echoed across decks already warping from heat. Thick smoke reduced visibility to meters. The sea below waited, cold and unforgiving. Crew members had seconds to decide, stay or jump. Onboard footage later surfaced from the Solong, capturing a crew member praying aloud as explosions continued around him. The audio was raw, unfiltered, a human voice confronting disaster in real time. Others were already abandoning ship, climbing down ladders or leaping directly into the water as flames spread. The response aboard the Stena Immaculate followed a different rhythm. Emergency drills took over. Training replaced panic. The crew executed evacuation procedures with discipline. Lifeboats launched, headcounts conducted, commands followed even as fire raged nearby. All 23 American crew members escaped alive. The contrast was stark. One vessel evacuated under chaos. The other is under construction. Both face the same fire, the same sea, the same uncertainty. Yet outcomes diverged sharply. A reminder that preparation, even at sea, often decides who survives the first minutes of disaster. Rescue efforts began almost immediately, but nothing about them was simple. Fog lingered over the water. Smoke reduced visibility. Burning fuel threatened responders as much as survivors. RNLI lifeboats launched from Bridlington, Mablethorpe, Skegness, and Cleethorpes. Coast Guard helicopters swept overhead. Firefighting aircraft circled cautiously. Nearby commercial vessels diverted course. The sea is filled with movement. A wind farm crew transfer vessel, already operating in the area, became a critical lifeline. It pulled 13 survivors from the water and raced them back towards shore. Pilot boats followed, delivering more rescued crew to Grimsby's fish docks. Ambulances lined the port, engines running, ready for casualties whose conditions were still unknown. 32 people were brought ashore alive. Some were injured. One required hospitalization. One never came back. As night fell, search crews continued scanning the water for a missing Solong crew member. Hours passed, hope thinned. Eventually, the search was called off. The sea had claimed another life. The missing crew member was Filipino. He had entered the water during the evacuation and was never recovered. By morning, authorities made the quiet decision that defines so many maritime tragedies. Presumed dead. At sea, death is often anonymous. It leaves no witnesses, no final answers, just absence. This single loss transformed the collision from an accident into something heavier. A fatality changes legal thresholds. It reshapes responsibility. It forces investigators to ask not just what happened, but who failed. For the family left behind, the distinction is meaningless. For the law, it is everything. A death at sea carries consequences that extend far beyond the wreckage, into courtrooms, criminal statutes, and questions of negligence that can no longer be avoided. In the days after the collision, attention shifted to what the ships carried and what could still be leaking into the sea. The Solong's cargo included alcohol, but early reports mistakenly suggested it was transporting sodium cyanide, a highly toxic chemical. The ship's owner later clarified that this was a misrepresentation. While the vessel had previously carried the chemical, only empty containers remained on board. The correction mattered. Fear spreads faster than facts. The Stena Immaculate's cargo, however, required no clarification. She was carrying approximately 220,000 barrels of Jet A-1 aviation fuel, chartered for the United States Air Force. Military fuel, strategic cargo, not crude oil, but something arguably more dangerous when ignited. Jet fuel burns cleaner than crude, but it is far more volatile. Once released, it spreads quickly across water, producing intense fires and toxic fumes. It doesn't coat feathers like heavy oil, but it poisons what it touches. The presence of military fuel elevated the incident beyond commercial loss. It introduced questions of national security, environmental risk, and the safety of global fuel supply chains moving quietly across the world's oceans every day. As flames died down, fear shifted from fire to fallout. Jet fuel had leaked. Heavy bunker fuel, used to power both ships, remained an unknown quantity. Authorities moved quickly, but uncertainty dominated the early hours. The North Sea is not empty water. It is a living system. Seabirds like puffins, gannets, and kittiwakes were already gathering offshore for nesting season. Seals and porpoises hunted beneath the surface. Toxic exposure at this moment could ripple through entire populations. Jet fuel does not smother wildlife the way crude oil does, but it is poisonous. Even limited exposure can damage ecosystems already under stress. Then came another warning sign: nurdles. Small plastic resin pellets began washing ashore days later, evidence of how far debris from the collision had traveled. Environmental agencies, salvage teams, and marine chemists converged on the site. Air and water sampling began. Surveillance flights tracked slicks invisible from the surface. This was no longer just about ships. It was about containment, about preventing a short-lived disaster from becoming a long-term ecological scar. With the fires under control, attention turned to stabilization. Exclusion zones were imposed. Firefighting tugs remained on station. Salvors boarded both vessels cautiously, assessing damage beneath blackened decks. Dutch salvage firm Boskalis was contracted to lead operations on the tanker. Their priority was clear: lighten the remaining jet fuel before structural failure could release it. Transfer operations began, slowly and methodically, tank by tank. The Stena Immaculate's double-hull design proved decisive. Watertight compartments limited flooding. Power systems remained functional. What looked catastrophic from the air was, beneath the surface, still survivable. The Solong, badly damaged, drifted under escort toward safer waters. Both vessels remained afloat, a technical victory amid human and environmental loss. Yet even as salvage crews worked, investigators were already asking deeper questions, because ships do not collide like this without someone failing first. As the fires cooled and rescue vessels withdrew, a different response moved quietly into place. On shore, Humberside police opened a criminal investigation, a rare but decisive step in maritime disasters. This was no longer just an accident to be analyzed. It was a potential crime to be examined. Within days, the captain of the MV Solong, a 59-year-old Russian national, was arrested. The charge was severe: gross negligence, manslaughter. In maritime law, such accusations are uncommon. The sea is unpredictable. Mechanical failures happen. The weather interferes. Prosecutors rarely pursue criminal liability unless the evidence suggests a profound breakdown of duty. Gross negligence at sea carries a high legal threshold. Investigators must demonstrate not merely error, but a reckless disregard for life. Conduct so far below acceptable standards that death becomes a foreseeable consequence. This standard exists to protect mariners from criminalization for unavoidable dangers, while still holding individuals accountable when safety systems are ignored entirely. The arrest signaled that authorities believed the collision crossed that line. A death had occurred, a stationary tanker had been struck at speed, and the question now facing investigators was stark. Was this tragedy inevitable or preventable? The legal process unfolded with measured gravity. Following his arrest, the Solong's captain was remanded in custody. Bail was not sought. The seriousness of the charge demanded restraint, not speed. Initial court appearances focused on identity and jurisdiction. No pleas were entered. The case moved steadily upward through the British judicial system, eventually arriving at the Old Bailey, a venue reserved for the most serious criminal proceedings. On May 30th, the captain entered a plea of not guilty via video link from prison. With that declaration, the case shifted from investigation to confrontation. Evidence would be tested, assumptions challenged, timelines reconstructed. A trial date was set for January 12, 2026. Until then, prosecutors must meet a demanding burden. They must prove that the captain's actions, or failures, directly caused the death. Those warnings were available. Those risks were obvious. Claims from fishermen, local authorities, and tourism operators affected by contamination fears and restricted waters. Governments may initially underwrite cleanup efforts, but reimbursement battles often last years. This collision will not end with verdicts. It will echo through insurance courts, arbitration panels, and environmental assessments long after the ships themselves are repaired or scrapped. The North Sea is not unique. It is a mirror. Across the world, shipping lanes grow denser. Military fuel, hazardous cargo, and commercial goods move through narrow corridors with increasing frequency. Fleets age, crews shrink, fatigue becomes normalized. This collision exposed the fragility beneath global logistics. A single lapse in attention nearly triggered an environmental disaster and claimed a life. Not in a storm, not in war, but on an ordinary morning. Maritime safety depends less on innovation than discipline, procedures, presence, accountability. And as automation increases, the human role becomes more important, not less. The investigation is not over. The MAIB's final report has yet to be released. Detailed analysis of the voyage data recorders continues. Each second of audio is examined. Each data point was weighed. In January 2026, a courtroom will attempt to answer what the sea cannot: whether negligence crossed into criminality, whether responsibility rests with one man, or a system that allows attention to drift. The outcome may influence future regulations, manning requirements, watchkeeping standards, fatigue management across global fleets. What began as a collision now moves toward judgment, slowly, methodically, with consequences that may reshape how ships are watched and how mistakes are counted. A single moment of negligence turns steel and fuel into fire, death, and unanswered questions. As investigators dig deeper and a courtroom prepares for judgment, this collision stands as a warning. At sea, mistakes don't fade quietly. They burn, drift, and demand accountability. If this story mattered, like, share, subscribe, and leave your thoughts below.